Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Richard Fleming, and today is Wednesday, December 9th, 2020. I'm going to step outside a little bit of my usual presentation mode today by spending some time reading from some of the documentation I've provided in the books Unmasking COVID to answer some of the questions I've seen posted in social media and during the discussion, particularly yesterday when the Homeland Security Committee had a second hearing looking at the importance of treating SARS CoV 2 or COVID 19 in the pre hospital setting in an effort to reduce the number of people that required hospitalization and the number of people dying from SARS CoV 2. The questions have looked at where this virus, this coronavirus, came from. So I want to hit on a couple topics today and just take a moment to read to you from some of the data that I've put together. Some of you may recall that SARS CoV 1 occurred in China in 2002. And while that did not produce a pandemic, it did produce considerable interest in the researchers in the United States and in China. They became extremely interested in how they could increase the ability of this virus to infect people. And so in 2002, Dr. Shi Zhengli, Zhengli of the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the very same Wuhan Institute that we've been talking about with SARS CoV 2, began investigating the original SARS CoV 1 virus and looked at how they could insert a human immune deficiency virus pseudosystem to increase the infectivity and tenacity of this virus. In 2007, a special committee and group of investigators were put together from Italy, France, and Indiana University to look at what actions should be taken in the event that a pandemic of a virus such as SARS CoV 1 or SARS CoV 2 should escape the virology labs and be transmitted around the world. This study, while it included U.S. investigators, was also funded by the National Science Foundation. Award to S0513650. Research was published on this and made available not only to U.S. sources, which would include the National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Diseases, where Dr. Fauci is the head, but the World Health Organization and numerous other agencies around the world. And that data showed that in the event of a pandemic of a potentially infectious virus like SARS CoV 2, that the first critical factor that must be instituted is to shut down all international travel. Knowing that the Wuhan Institute had conducted research back in 2002 inserting an HIV component into the naturally occurring coronavirus, and knowing that the treatment response for a pandemic begins with shutting down international travel, it raises serious questions as to why Dr. Fauci and others in the federal government did not warn President Trump to shut down international travel on the first signs of this pandemic. More importantly, I'll raise the questions of the fact that Dr. Fauci specifically went against President Trump by stating that travel did not need to be shut down. This research, funded out of the National Science Foundation and conducted in the United States as well as Italy and France, says exactly the opposite. Had that been the only process going on in the change of this virus, one might be happy to say it could have just been a natural mutation. However, in 2013, Dr. Zhengli and her team also commented on changes in the spike protein, that well-known protein that we've all come to hear about attaching to the ACE2 receptor. In 2013, at the same time that the MERS coronavirus was more devastating with a 40-some% death rate in the Middle East. 2 years later, the virologists like Zhang Li and the Wuhan team put in their publication that, quote, re-engineering the HKU4 spike, the spike protein, aiming to build its capacity to mediate viral entry into human cells. To this end, the researchers humanly introduced two single mutations. Mutations in these motifs in coronavirus spikes have demonstrated dramatic effects on viral entry into human cells. If that's not enough, bear in mind that research has also shown that the PRR, I think it's PRRA, my apologies, the PRRA insert, which is a rabies insert, has proven to be very detrimental by researchers showing that this would increase the ability of the virus to be attached to the H2 receptor and would increase, in fact, the natural tendency for the virus to be taken in. And that is the PRRA superantigen cobra and rabies toxin. So my apologies for not having remembered that immediately, but it's the PRRA. So we have 3 instances of documented data showing human manipulation of this virus to make it more infective, after which it somehow gets out of the Wuhan Institute where it clearly existed. Now, coupled with the fact that US taxpayer money went into the National Science Foundation to pay for a study showing that shutting down international travel is the first criteria for controlling a pandemic of the types that these virologists were working on, not only in Wuhan, but in the United States. There's evidence from University of North Carolina, from Fort Detrick, as well as now Indiana, discussing how to control these pandemics. For Dr. Fauci and the others not to have warned the president, and more importantly, to have opposed the president in shutting down international travel, requires, I believe, a significant federal investigation. Finally, the presentation yesterday was extremely disrespectful. When non-scientists, people that are not trained in the scientific method, have never done research, and non-clinicians, people who have never had a license to practice medicine or actually taken care of and been responsible for the care of patients that might die, for such individuals to sit on a Senate committee and to reprimand physicians that are presenting what they believe is in the best interest of the country and to share the information that they have with that committee, that type of behavior is disrespectful and condescending. If you are not a scientist and you do not have the expertise to have these discussions, and you are not a clinician, and you have never been responsible for whether somebody lives or dies under your care, you do not have the right to be condescending or to challenge those who do. Those of us who are scientists and physicians may have that right. And here's one of the rights I'm going to exhibit. In my discussion of SARS CoV-2, COVID-19, I end the first 2 books with a question about where we're going. Since this virus was a naturally occurring virus that was human modified, and it significantly increased the infectivity, making it possible for people to spread the virus more easily and for the virus to get into cells and cause more of an inflammatory thrombotic response, which is the reason why people are dying. I had concluded it by stating not only do we need to address SARS-CoV-2, but we need to be aware of the potential changes in the future of additional pandemics and additional human manipulation. Here's my concern. We have treatments that are now shown to be 99.83% effective. That data is in the published data that I have. And interestingly enough, as I compare the outpatient responses of people taking hydroxychloroquine and other drugs with what we saw in our research, the numbers are fairly close, close enough to confirm each other's scientific research. And that is the gold standard of research, the ability that somebody else's results match your results. What we don't know is much about these vaccines. We don't need them, and we don't need an emergency use authorization for them, since we now have defined treatments that are successful. But we don't know actually what's in these vaccines. In the past, we've given vaccines to people and injected parts of a bacteria or a virus into people so that our immune responses can see those virus particles or bacteria outside of the cells and attack them and develop an immune response. These vaccines appear to actually go one step further and put that genetic material from these viruses inside human cells. Now, that bypasses some of the actual response mechanisms for developing an immune response. But here's my question. Above and beyond the fact that we haven't been measuring IgA antibodies, which is the antibody that should be tested for a virus that is spread by the respiratory or gastrointestinal tract like this virus is, we have no idea what the genetic material is that's being put into these vaccines. It dawned on me last night as I was trying to go to sleep that we may not be needing to wait for a future pandemic. These vaccines may be the next pandemic. We have no evidence, and I've seen nothing to suggest that the genetic code for what's being inserted in these vaccines is SARS CoV 2. It could be SARS CoV 3.